picture in Gen 2 pen.
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained, and today we're going to take a look at the awesome sci-fi thriller Deep Blue Sea, which was directed by Renny Harlin, starring Thomas Jane, Samuel L. Jackson, Saffron Burrows, Stellan Skarsgård, Jacqueline McKenzie, and the one and only LL Cool J. Set predominantly in an underwater facility, the film follows a team of scientists who are genetically modifying the brain structure of sharks as a means of finding a cure for the degeneration of brain cells, Alzheimer's, and other degenerative diseases. The film opens with a group of teenagers partying on their yacht before it starts getting attacked from below by something that is toying with them. They soon realize it's a short-fin mako shark as it bursts through the hull, knocking a few of them into the water. Luckily for the group, the shark is soon restrained by Carter Blake, a shark wrangler working for Aquatica, which is essentially a marine facility dedicated to research aimed at curing Alzheimer's, and the location from which the genetically modified shark had just broken free. The test shark was essentially one of 3 mako short fins that had been genetically engineered by Susan McAllister, who was working with the Aquatica facility to produce and harvest a protein complex from the brains of the advanced sharks, in the hopes that it could serve as a means of reactivating human brain cells. One of the researchers mentioned that the team had used a hormonal enhancer to increase the shark's brain to 5 times the normal size, and therefore increase their sample size. However, even this ended up being a modest estimate of their actual intelligence, as we later find out that Susan herself had violated the code of ethics and had actually used gene therapy to increase their brain mass further. As a result of this, the sharks became smarter and more dangerous. Along with their advanced problem-solving abilities, they were also able to swim backwards, which regular sharks are not able to do, and were seen feeding on their own kind, as was evident when the tiger shark that was introduced into their pen was immediately devoured by his genius-level kin in what appeared to look like a coordinated attack. News of the recent escape attempt had sent shockwaves throughout the international community, which was expected to send the share price of Aquatica's main donors, a parent company called Chimera Pharmaceuticals, plummeting over the weekend. Concerned that they may have a serious problem on their hands, the company requests a meeting with McAllister, who begs them for another 48 hours, claiming to be on the verge of a breakthrough. Chimera's board president, a man named Russell Frank, played by the legendary Samuel L., reluctantly agrees, on the condition that he gets to have a closer look at their work. Russell is also later discovered to have been a hero of sorts, having rescued a few people during an avalanche, and serves as a brief glimpse of hope during their struggle later in the film. Carter, who is a very gifted swimmer and shark wrangler, explains to Russell, who was surprised to see him swimming so comfortably with the creatures, that sharks don't like the taste of humans and would only bite you because they've mistaken you for a seal or a rich suit, understandably inspiring no reassurance in the executive. Janice, who was played by fellow Australian actor Jacqueline McKenzie, and also a fellow alumni of my performing arts college, explains that Carter was just unhappy that Russell could shut them down at any minute, ending years of their hard work. Most of the crew is seen leaving as Jan informs Russell that they were heading home for the weekend, upon which the facility would then be operated by a skeleton crew. The weekend is generally not when they do any work other than maintenance, but the arriving Monday and the potentially massive falls in share prices for Chimera force McAllister to rush ahead, which will soon prove to be disastrous. Tom, who is one of the marine biologists, asks Carter if he missed the first shot the night before, but Carter insists that both shots of the harpoon and the tranquilizer on their tips barely contained the shark, much to Tom's disbelief. Carter also jokingly berates his teammate for leaving the pen open, which enabled one of the sharks to escape, but Tom also insists that he had locked it the night before, leaving both guys slightly distrusting each other. The massive facility is explained as having 3 main sublevels, with titanium-based fencing stretching over the enclosure. Jim Whitlock, a fellow geneticist, tells McAllister that they are essentially fast-forwarding 3 months of trials over a day, but she ignores this while preparing for their next procedure, simply stating that they had no choice. Susan continues to ignore all the warnings, including Carter, who notes that the temperament and behavior of the test sharks had been rapidly changing, citing that they were now beginning to hunt in packs. Driven by the hope that she could cure the Alzheimer's that had plagued her family, McAllister continues her preparations as a severe storm begins to approach the already understaffed facility. While the team is preparing to harvest a brain sample, the 2 Generation 1 male sharks simultaneously attack Carter, who is traveling through the titanium bridge, only stopping after he shows them the tranquilizer gun. They then retreat before taking out many of the cameras that covered the enclosure in a coordinated blitz. Even with limited visual support from his crew, Carter is able to lure the enormous Generation 2 female towards him before sedating her for the procedure. Now, what's terrifying is that the sharks had essentially anticipated this move, which is why they laid out a systematic means of attack to prevent their leader from being captured. McAllister is eventually able to surgically remove a portion of the shark's brain tissue and introduces a small amount of the protein complex into cultured, inactive brain neurons of an Alzheimer's patient, and much to their surprise, the membrane begins to stimulate regrowth within a few seconds. Just as they begin to contemplate the results and subsequent applications of this breakthrough, the shark wakes up and bites Jim, severing his arm in the process. Carter immediately attempts to shoot and kill the shark, but McAllister prevents him from doing so by releasing it back into the enclosure. A helicopter is then called to deal with the emergency and sends down a line that the team then attached to Jim's gurney. Unfortunately for both Jim and the rescue crew, their equipment malfunctions, sending the poor man into the water, where he's then collected by one of the sharks who uses him to pull the helicopter into the communications tower, causing a massive explosion that reverberates throughout the facility. Moments later, the sharks then use Jim as a battering ram to shatter the lab's toughened windows, which begins flooding the entire compound. The facility's chef, Sherman Dudley, who was oblivious to what had just happened, starts noticing that the facility has begun to leak before one of the doors in front of him bursts open, inundating more of the facility with seawater. The group has also encountered more problems, with all the doors flooded, leaving them no option but to travel further down to make it to the mini-sub that would then enable them to take 2 people up to the surface at a time. The tension picks up as a mako shark can be heard banging at a nearby door, slowly destroying its structural integrity before forcing it open, as the realization that the sharks were after the crew begins to sink in. Russell begins demanding answers, causing McAllister to finally admit that Jim and herself had decided to add gene therapies to the sharks' development, to increase their brain size even further, as the initial sample size was deemed too small to be effective. They soon make it to the sub and find that it's completely destroyed, forcing them to have to swim to the surface. Meanwhile, the lone Sherman is soon besieged by one of the sharks in the flooded hallways, which follows him into the kitchen, leading him to hide in the industrial oven as it continued to break through the glass. The shark then accidentally turns on the gas, leading Sherman to escape the confines of the oven, before igniting the gas and blowing it up as revenge for killing his bird. Russell attempts to inspire the group who are fighting amongst themselves and reveals some secrets regarding his avalanche escape, including the hidden fact that more of them could have survived had they not turned on each other. Unfortunately for Russell and the group's overall morale, he is soon surprisingly taken by the massive mako shark. Unable to swim directly to the surface, the group then make it inside the stairwell, which destabilizes the pressure in the previous chamber, sending more water to their location and paving a way for the sharks who are close on their tail. They lose a few more members of their team before reuniting with Sherman. McAllister also makes a final attempt at salvaging some data, but is then stalked by the remaining male mako shark. Using her swimsuit as an insulator, Susan is able to electrocute the shark, but destroys her files in the process. The 3 survivors then make it to the surface in a daring escape by distracting the remaining Generation 2 shark with life jackets, only to have it bite Sherman, who repeatedly hits it with his cross, before finally getting it in the eye, forcing the shark to let him go. Carter and McAllister then look on at the sinking facility as the realization begins to sink in that the sharks had been herding them this whole time to force the team to flood their own facility and subsequently allow the sharks to escape. Carter loads up some dynamite in place of the traditional tranquilizers, but finds that the massive shark is way too far for him to reach. Burdened with guilt for the countless deaths caused by her actions, McAllister cuts her hand and jumps into the water, luring the prehistoric predator away from the fence, which was moments from collapsing. The shark then returns back to the facility in pursuit of McAllister, who also desperately tries to make it back onto the platform. Unfortunately for Susan, the shark grabs her and rips her apart before eating her and heading for Carter, who also jumped into the water to save her. Luckily for the shark wrangler, he's able to dodge an attack before clinging onto its fin as Sherman wakes up and fires the harpoon at the beast, impaling both Carter and the underwater predator. Carter is able to get himself free, allowing Sherman to then detonate the explosive and destroy the giant shark in its entirety, leading to the conclusion of the film. I thought it was interesting to note that in the original version, McAllister actually survived her final encounter, but when tested with an audience a few months prior to the official release, many people said they were unhappy as they saw her as the true villain of the film, which led the studio to reshoot the ending and kill her character off. Another one of my guilty pleasure films, Deep Blue Sea is the perfect blend of the Poseidon Adventure and Jaws, whilst also remaining completely independent of those two films. Screenwriter Duncan Kennedy got the idea for the film after witnessing a horrific shark attack at a beach near his home, which haunted him in his sleep and forced him to write the basis for what would become Deep Blue Sea. At the same time, the creators did want to acknowledge that Jaws came before it, throwing in a little homage to Spielberg, with Carter removing a license plate from one of the sharks earlier in the film. Well, that's all for today, folks. Thanks to all of you guys who requested we take a look at Deep Blue Sea. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all my content. And if there's any other stuff you'd like me to check out, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
Somebody, please, tell me what that is. Please. All right, people, let's move.